thank you very much for your patience. I know we've all taken some time here today. One of the things I definitely want to touch on that I think in their own way both Trajan and Willie talked about, and I think it's the word excitement comes up too often this time of year. Everybody's undefeated right now. Everybody thinks they're going to be really good. I think where we're really unique is we're really optimistic, coming off of a year in which the first part of the year when we were healthy, we were very, very good. And the second part of the year, as we closed the last 12 games, we played very well. I think we were 9-3, and Brandon Ingram led the NBA in scoring in that period of time in total points. We have pieces that can be really dynamic and can win together. They haven't done a lot of it, and I think everybody understands that we've got a lot to prove. We are really blessed. Both Willie and Trajan mentioned this. Mrs. Benson and her management team are amazing in the fact that they've given us the ability to have continuity, that they've given us a stable backdrop. I heard the question raised to Trajan about the tax. There's never been a mandate to us to stay out of the tax. This is all based on results. And this team has a lot to prove to each other. We have a lot to prove on and off the court. But what we're not going to worry about is things like that. Our results are going to dictate outcome. And I think we have a group of players that understand that. Trajan alluded to a lot of the changes that we've made, both in terms of coaching staff, and I know Willie explained a lot of that. Also the medical team. Willie talked about the conversations we had where we had to take a hard look at the things we do well and those that we don't, and I think we've been humble enough as an organization to make a lot of changes in areas we needed to. One of those areas is Trajan is actually going to be the one on a day-to-day basis that's the key component of the medical team from our front office staff. He'll be the one handling that, and I'm already excited by the changes that have been made there because of it. I think when you have a former player in a position like that, they bring a certain level of passion to it that's different, and a big part of that was listening a whole lot more and being less dogmatic and more willing to be flexible. It's funny, Willie and I think oftentimes are similarly old school in a lot of ways that we look at things. We're going to earn what we earn. That's not an area where we can fall into that. That's an area where we need to be much more willing to be flexible, and I'm grateful that Trajan was ready to do that and excited about it. I think what we've done coaching staff-wise, Willie alluded to his relationship with Coach Borrego. It's always difficult when you add a coach to an already good coaching staff. Jaron Collins had already interviewed for head coaching jobs. Fred Vinson is as good at his piece of this whole thing as anybody can be. Casey has been tremendous in his role. And I think it's very difficult when you add somebody to that group unless the guys that are the holdovers really embrace it. And I think that's the thing that excites me the most is the human beings we have here. Everybody just wants to win. Everybody's selfless enough to realize it doesn't really matter whose role is what. What matters is we find a way to win. And I think it's a tribute to Willie that he puts that mindset into everybody. I think it says a great deal about the caliber of human beings. Trajan mentioned that earlier. The one thing about continuity when you haven't had a healthy group is A, you have optimism that when they're healthy, they'll be good. But B, you know that they interact well and their chemistry is good as a group. And this team has always really cared about each other. And so with that as a backdrop, it gives you a great deal of energy to move forward in a positive way and have optimism. So again, we look at this as a really big opportunity for us, but also one where we're not hiding from anything. We know we have a lot to prove. And I think, again, ownership has afforded us the opportunity to have stability, and we're grateful. But there has to be a payoff for that in our fan base, and I know people are ready to see this group come together. I know our players are ready to see it. Coach mentioned C.J. McCollum. His offseason is absolutely amazing from the standpoint of what he's been doing to lead us every day in the gym. Coach talked about the condition he's in, the conversation they had at the end of the season that helped sort of propel C.J. into that. It certainly didn't hurt that the CBA got settled. That helped us a lot. I think he was spending a lot of time on that as well, but I'm grateful that is behind us now. But more than anything else, just excited with the way that a guy that we intended when we acquired him to be very much a team leader has led by example. In much the way that Herb Jones has always led by example. He's not terribly quiet. He's not terribly vocal. Quite the opposite. He's not terribly vocal, but he's a very quiet leader. and he's doing everything he needs to do to show guys the right path in terms of effort, grit, and grind, and the types of things that, like, you want a team to represent. He brings that every day. So I think kind of low-key, we've got a simmering leadership group there. And I think relative to Brandon, he's another player who's going to hit the ground in elite condition this year from a basketball perspective, which is exciting. Some of you have heard me say this before, but what Brandon has historically done is lift pretty heavy. And then when he plays during training camp, he's sort of playing on the new body because he didn't want to lose weight before camp started. He wanted to keep the strength. So now he's going to hit the ground running and I think have a rhythm and a stasis physically that's important for us. It gives us a great deal of optimism for sure. Everybody has alluded to Zion. Zion is obviously in good condition. The thing that I think is important is CJ and Brandon throughout their careers have always employed people on their own that take care of their body, that take care of their nutrition. They're doing 2-a-days when they practice with us. They'll be working with their own people at night, and they're really vested and invested in their profession. And this was the first summer where we've seen Zion really take his profession seriously like that and invested off the court on his own in a way that I think is meaningful. So I don't want too much to be made about being in our gym. I want it to be that he found a level of commitment that was important, because that's really significant. If you look at all of the best players in this league, they all make it a focal point in their life to invest in keeping their bodies healthy and keeping themselves in peak condition. And I think we have 3 guys in our big 3 that are now doing that, which is extremely encouraging. Jonas Valanciunas has always done that. Jonas is coming off of his 17th straight international competition because he believes that's the best way to keep himself in condition. But he's also employed somebody pretty much his entire NBA career to help him take care of his body. He has his own physio that he's used throughout. So again, more of that investing in the process, and JV's always been about that. So we're encouraged that we have a group that is what they are. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to see Trey Murphy to start camp. The downside of that is also a blessing and a curse. The downside is we won't see it. The blessing is he's going to continue to be able to lift and get stronger and improve the things that he worked on. Immediately before he got injured in our gym, the one thing you saw in Trey was the work he put in this offseason. His body's different. He can take a little bit more contact and finish at the rim a little bit better. He's able to sit and slide a little bit better. And I think to a huge degree, while it's awful we're not going to have him early, this might actually help him continue to work in that area and get stronger and be more physically capable of competing and keeping his additional weight on. So there could be a blessing in that. The downside to Jose Alvarado, obviously, is that you lose Grand Theft Alvarado and all the energy he brings to us. The positive is Dyson Daniels is going to get an opportunity, and he's worked his ass off this offseason with the national team. He's looked really good in our gym. Kyra Lewis has looked outstanding in our gym. So these things provide opportunity for people. Larry Nance not being able to start camp right away is an opportunity for both Cody, who didn't need it. He's got finals experience. But for E.J. Liddell to show us that he's finding a way to impact winning and losing, and we've seen that in our gym every day. Coach alluded to, and the question was asked about Herb Jones, a small ball 5. We've gotten to see that in our gym, and maybe we'll get to see more of that sort of by necessity, and that could be a blessing. One of the things that happened last year, and I don't think this has been touched on enough, and I know I've talked about it, the whole idea of the load management thing is thrown out the window when you're just trying to find 8 healthy bodies. And Coach Green and his staff managed to find a way to plug a lot of holes and keep us competitive and give us a winning season when they didn't know from day to day who they were going to have. And what that says about them is all incredibly positive. But what it says about the opportunity in front of us is very large. You know, we felt like we had a lot of depth going into last season, and we rode the wheels off of those guys too. And I hope we can be in a situation now where you're starting to see the fruits of all of the work the coaches, our performance team, and the players have put in the offseason. If we can bring that all together, we're optimistic. I hate the word excited because literally everybody at every team up here is saying that. But we've got reason for it, and we can track the things that guys have put into it. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
When you guys sat down at the end of last season and just looked at, hey, what worked, what didn't work, what was the process like of eventually deciding we need to change a few things on the medical side?
Yeah, I think what a lot of it had to do with, and Trajan alluded to this, was, end of year meetings with players. Um, it certainly took into account all of the games we had been missing, but it was really more process driven, I think. It was the means by which we communicate, how those things are determined. He mentioned Amy Atmore having a physical therapist on staff. I don't think philosophically the group's going to be radically different. I think what's going to be different is, whereas we may have had power in a much smaller group of hands, we're going to have far more voices in the process. I think Daniel Bove and Tom Maystat, along with Amy, will be more of a three-headed monster for us in the medical area. I think Dr. Montgomery will have a much more vocal role in that process as well. So we're grateful. Again, we've got really good human beings, and I think we have people that are selfless enough to get this done.
And with Zion and Brandon specifically, the number of games they've missed, I mean, there's just going to be injuries that happen. There's nothing you can do about it. There's just bad luck, and that occurs. But how much of the amount of time they've missed has been just that bad luck you can't do anything about it, and how much of it has been like things that they can kind of control to get back in the court?
I'd let them tell you a little bit of how they see that in terms of what they can do differently. I think in terms of the bad luck, we certainly had a good deal of that. And I don't know how many different ways we can do energy clearings in the building, but we'll continue to do it. We certainly had a run of bad luck, but I think there's always more you can do to put yourself in position to succeed, and I think both of those guys continue to evolve in their ability to recognize that. I know what CJ himself did this offseason has been a great lesson in that for us. So.
Zion was in the headlines a lot for the wrong reasons in the offseason, but speaking about how he was in the gym more than you've seen in previous years, what does it say about him focusing on his craft amidst the drama?
So to some degree, I take exception to the fact that he was in the media for the wrong reasons. I think if you look at his actions, what his actions have been is to take responsibility and accountability this offseason. That may not have been received the way people would have liked it to be. But Coach Green talked about this last night too. Accountability is something that there's no substitute for. You either take responsibility for your role in things or you don't. And I think Zion's learning how to do that. And maybe as part of the things that he went through this offseason, that contributed to that. Again, there's always a blessing in the things that we go through and endure. And as long as you continue to endure and overcome adversity, those things that happen to us are positive. And we've seen a lot of evidence to support that Zion's growing and maturing because of those things. And again, it's to Coach's point, taking accountability for what you've done in your life is a big part of that. Well, to a huge degree, it was Trajan and our existing medical staff who made that determination. But again, when you visit Amy and you spend time with her, the human that she is, the way she approaches this, she has a very scientific approach. She has a very measured approach. She has a very selfless way about her. She never makes it a me thing, and she's just a tremendous listener. And I think that's really important when you have her particular background and her particular skill set working with elite athletes, both in an NBA setting but also in an individual setting. That's a unique package she brings.
We've heard you say a number of times throughout the years how tough it is to evaluate when you're missing guys, for long periods of time. How important is it to kind of get those answers to those questions this year with this group and kind of figure out how far you can go with these guys?
Yeah, I think extremely. And I think the reason for that is hope's not a plan, right? I've said that before. We can't just hope we're healthy. We've got to make really measured decisions about making this team better. And I think everybody understands there's a great deal riding on this season. And it's less honestly about we must win this much. And it's more about the process must improve to this point that we can continue to show sustained, what Coach called sustained success. You make the playoffs one year, you have a winning record the next year. The next step's really meaningful. And if this team can't take that next step, we need to know that as quickly as possible because the injuries have slowed us quite a bit. Somebody mentioned COVID earlier. It impacted every team in the league, but it's slowed everybody's process. So I think every team in the league has been impacted by that. There was a period of time where maybe 2 seasons were one big long season, but it's time now to bring some sort of terminal velocity to what we've built, and I think you're going to see us do that.
Can you, I guess 4.5 years ago, sometimes seems like yesterday, but sometimes seems like an eternity, and there's a lot of growth between you all and Zion. are where you are. Maybe some of it was just kind of rhetoric, but do you think the reality is now that y'all have found a common ground and this is potentially the best place everybody has been in after 4.5 years?
I hope so, but again, there's 30 people telling you that right now, so we'll see. We have to prove that. The great thing about our game is we get to prove that. And if we're right and everything that we've been saying, the rhetoric, as you say, if we're accurate in that, it's going to show in our results. And if we're not, that's also going to show in our results. And we need to be willing to act upon those things. You know, our job is ultimately to broker in what we know, and we're going to learn along with all of you exactly what we have here.
You mentioned, kind of building a terminal velocity towards sustained success, and then in your introduction, you also mentioned not having a mandate on the tax and it being results-based. How do those two things kind of square in the sense that, like, yes, you do want to see an upward trajectory, but, like, is there a threshold where you're like, you can take this leap of faith, and how are you guys hoping to find that threshold?
If we were a completely healthy version of ourselves and in December we're the same team we were last December, we're going to feel pretty vested in the process and feel like we're on the right track, right? I mean, again, it's all going to be results. I don't think there's any other metric I can give you. You know, Coach Green talked about taking more threes. We want to do that. But taking more threes isn't going to be the reason we decide to stay in the tax, right? We're going to know if this group is working because you're all going to know it's working. Our fans are going to know it's working. And our fans have bought into this in an amazing way. The sales for this team are the best they've ever been by leaps and bounds. We're radically further ahead than we've ever been. That's been sort of an ongoing thing. Where we've failed is our no-show rate continues to be really high because we're not showing up often enough. And I think our process needs to yield results, and everybody knows that.
Looking at the leadership in the locker room, you brought up CJ, Larry, Valanciunas. When it's going good, it's easy to lead. You see some of the bigger faces in Zion and BI, but in the tougher times, you see JV, CJ, and Larry kind of step up, especially this offseason. Larry's been really engaged with the fan base, doing Twitter spaces, stuff like that. Can you speak of that leadership and maybe the leadership that's been brought into the building you didn't know you needed, but those guys provided?
Yeah, so one, I think that's one thing we were pretty clear we needed. You know, when you don't have an alpha number one player who's clearly the linchpin for everything every day vocally, you need to get leadership from a lot of different places in the locker room. And we knew Larry was going to be a part of that. I don't think we knew it was going to be quite in the fashion it took. But honestly, a big part of that was because he was injured and had time to do it, right? So sometimes you learn those things in a way that you don't want to learn them. But what Larry brings to us in the locker room is really profoundly important. What CJ brings is profoundly important. I think you're going to see Cody Zeller be a huge part. I mentioned it earlier. This is a guy who has finals experience in the Heat organization. It's not an accident he's here. So to your point, we're really grateful. We have a lot of different points of contact, but it's also something that Coach Green and Trajan and Swin and myself were all abundantly clear we needed more leadership. I think Swin has done an amazing job from her role of raising the family, but because of that, we know sort of what the family lacks. So I think we're in a good position there.
Griffin, you mentioned the training staff, coach staff, and Trey Murphy separately, but how is he coming along in his process of coming back?
Did you say Trey?
Yeah, Trey.
Yeah, so he's coming along well. I think he's certainly in a good headspace. He seems like he's really buying into where he's going and how this process is going. But I'd let you get that answer from him.
Because
Al Davis used to say just win big. Is that this year or is it not?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think it's fair. I also think it's fair to say there's not a limit you can place on these things. Like, I think it's just win, but show that you're moving in the right direction. You know, show that there's a reason to continue to have the optimism we have. And I think it's different when you're in the NFL and there's at the time Al said that there was a 16-game season. It's a little different when you play one game a weekend 16 times, right? You can load everything into each individual week. Coach Green alluded to this, but our job is to be the best we can possibly be at the end of the season after an 82-game season. So it's just win, but it's just win and build, which is a little bit different than just win a series of one-offs. We're not going to do that. The in-season tournament was referenced earlier. coach. Coach has talked about this too. It's on the schedule. We might as well win it, right? Like it's something that I think nobody really knows what it means, but we know winning matters. So that's another area where we want to translate that.
You guys got a new deal done with Herb Jones. Why did you guys decide to get that done right now? And just what are your thoughts on, that the agreement you guys struck with him?
Yeah, I think we reached the point where we realized the value in a deal with Herb was so good that we couldn't not do it. It would have been very easy for us if we were in that no tax situation to not do it and just play it out until the end of the year. But the value of the contract was important to us, and the value of the stability was important to Herb and his family. And Herb wanted to stay here. He wanted to stay mightily, actually. So I think it means a lot for both sides. But it's really a sign of how far he's come and his ability to impact winning and losing for us. And I think you've all seen it. We're a different team when he's on the court.
When you mentioned earlier alpha number one player in terms of leadership, do you think Zion has that in it? Do you think he needs to be that guy?
I don't think he needs to be that guy. If he is that guy, it makes everything easy for everybody else. If Brandon's that guy, it makes it easy for everybody else. If CJ's that guy, it makes it easy for everybody else. It's no more a Zion thing than anybody else. It's either in you or not in you to be that person, I think, at the end of the day. But one of the things that I think has slowed his ability to develop in that way is just availability. It's very difficult to be vocal when you're not playing. And I think he recognizes that. And to the point that Trajan made and Willie made, he's come a long way in that area. So I don't want to put any of that onus on him. From the very beginning, we never wanted to do that, maybe to a fault, honestly. From the very beginning of this, everybody wanted to make it about Zion, and we didn't. And I think we continue to be a group that recognizes we're going to win and lose as a group, and we want Z to be a huge part of that.
With your three injured guys, how much clarity do you have as far as when you're hoping to see them back on the court? And with Larry in particular, how much is that ankle something lingering from last year coming into this year?
I think in Larry's case, it probably is a little bit of residue from last year, just in terms of him never really finding comfort. This offseason, when he started to really ramp up, he noticed it again. So we took a more, invasive approach to make sure we shut him down for longer. So again, speaking to the learning from our past mistakes, I think Larry might be an example of that a little bit in terms of what we're doing with him. There may be more caution involved in this than necessary, but we think it's the right way to handle Larry moving forward. I think in terms of, Trey and Jose, I think their timelines are pretty affixed with what we said when we put the release out in the beginning. We're hopeful we'll have them both. In Trey's case, maybe, 10 to 12 weeks, so he's definitely on schedule for that, and we think we'll have Jose right around the start of the regular season.
Following up on that, with regards to Larry and CJ, maybe a couple of other players that played through a good number of injuries last year. What is the balance between sort of letting them play because you do need them on the court, you do need to make a playoff push, versus kind of looking out for them and their future and stepping in and be like, hey, like this might compromise something long term, or it's just not worth it. So how do you find that balance?
Yeah, I think first of all, we're never going to jeopardize anybody's long-term health to let them play. We wouldn't make a decision that we felt was doing that, and nobody ever would have done that. So that wasn't ever done before either. I think the balance really comes into listening to the people that you employ to tell you about it. From a medical staff standpoint, we need to be really mindful of what's being told to us, and our players need to trust that a little bit too. Larry is a great example of a guy who will hear, you cannot do X, and that's not what he hears. And I think we need to do a much better job of listening to one another, and we're certainly learning how to do that.
And a separate question, you guys have a nice collection of draft capital, but it's a little volatile now with the stock market. It's moves. How do you
How'd it go yesterday? Was that good? Yeah, no.
How do you sort of assess, that asset value, and also like where do you sort of reach the point where like, oh no, we might have held on to these too long, or like I guess moving forward, what's sort of the plan with that? Is there perhaps a few players you may be looking at down the road, like perhaps they may become available, we might push our chips in, or is it more of a wait and see type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're very mindful that there's going to be a time we have to be more opportunistic than others, but the players that become available aren't really up to us all the time either. I know I see sometimes the idea out there, and this was said a lot during the Damian Lillard trade discussions, that people should just load the gun and go get X. Well, deals don't really work like that. You know, people will show interest in the pieces you have, and then you have a determination to make about how much of them you're willing to part with. And when the right opportunity for the right player comes along, as it did with CJ, we make a move. And I think we've shown we'll be opportunistic. But for me to say right now, our window is out in this part of the future, I can't tell you that, because I can't tell you whatever every other cog in the wheel is going to provide to us. So we're willing to be extremely aggressive if the right piece is available. But also, and Coach Green alluded to this, we're trying to play for sustained success. You know, one of the downsides of having this group only play 10 games together is none of us is willing to say unequivocally this is a team that we are one player away. If we felt like we were one player away, we'd go get that one player. But we've got a hell of a lot to learn before we can ever say that.
Do you feel like the contract statuses of certain players do help illuminate a little bit of a window in the future? Your brain's up for extension. Texas was this summer, but more so next year. Trey will be up for extension. Just those kind of situations, and with the new CBA rules coming in, do you feel like that helps formulate like a loose idea of like, okay, like here's where we want to be, here's how our contracts are lined up, and perhaps we're going to target more aggression or whatever it may be, like in those type of timeframes?
So the last part you mentioned is the most important part of it, the new CBA. I think what you're seeing right now is the teams that are deep into the tax have sort of damned the torpedoes, and they're going to go even deeper because they know this is the 1 year they can do it. And then it becomes far more punitive to be there. So I think you're seeing teams that believe they're one player away doing everything they can to win right now. And this offseason, you're going to see people jettison a lot of money. And I think that's going to have a big role in the way that teams are building around that. I think there are several teams that are going to try to be opportunistic around that, and I don't think we're any different. This may not be the window for us. It may be a year from now. But there's going to be opportunities that are created by teams doing what they've done, and we'll be ready for that.
Isn't it a lot harder than it is in the NFL for a small market leagues?
Well, I think it's harder than it is in the NFL in large part because the TV deal in the NFL pays all your player salaries. Everything you make on attendance is pretty much gravy at that point. Their CBA structure is just so different. They also have a completely uniform media deal, so small markets and large markets get the same cut of media. So you don't have the ability for a large market to have a local TV deal that's $100 million more than ours. The NBA doesn't allow for that. So there's already a disproportionate level of power that big markets have. I know the new CBA is hoping that it addresses that, honestly. But the reality of the situation is there have been so many people buy into this league that are so incredibly wealthy. No matter what rule you put in place, somebody's going to find a way to get around it and to spend more money. And that's what our league is right now. It's very much an arms race. And so what we have to do is be mindful of when we invest at that level. And I think we have the ability to do that, just like anybody else does. It's to your point, it's different than the NFL because the playing field's a little different.
In light of Trey's injury and how integral, of course, he is to the perimeter attack, does the front office feel any kind of additional pressure of perhaps filling that empty spot on the roster, that 15th guaranteed contract, at some point early this season?
I don't think it's additional pressure as much as it is, and I used this word before, and I apologize, I've used it too much, but just finding the right opportunity, right? We don't feel pressure. We're hopeful the right opportunity comes along to fill it, but I also think we've got a roster we have a lot of faith in. I think our coaching staff has a lot of faith in. Jordan Hawkins is certainly going to get an opportunity in Trey's absence to absorb a lot of that missed shooting. So again, all of these things provide opportunity, and it's certainly a good opportunity for us to evaluate where we are and try to figure out when to strike.